Ever feel like you've drained every drop of dread the 1970s had to offer? Think again, fearless film foragers, because these 15 picks are about to resurrect the decade's most overlooked nightmares and plant them squarely in your must-watch queue. Dim the lights, grab your garlic, and let's pry open the crypt of supernatural chillers that got steamrolled by Jaws, Star Wars, and all those headline-hogging heavyweights. Ready? Let's roll. Let's Scare Jessica to Death, 1971. Picture yourself gliding across a mist-shrouded lake at dawn, only the oars, the hush of cattails, and a voice in your head that isn't entirely yours. That's the unnerving ambience director John Hancock conjures in this Ghost or Is It Madness marvel, shot for a shoestring $250,000 and rolled out to drive-ins still hungover from The Exorcist. Zora Lampert plays Jessica like a half-healed wound, out of the asylum, yes, but every ripple on the water feels like it might swallow her sanity. Hancock kept cast nerves jangling by piping distant church bell loops through hidden speakers, forbidding the crew to reassure Lampert between takes, method acting by stealth. The result eked out about $1 million, pocket change beside that year's blockbusters, yet its faded Polaroid palette and folk horror unease seeded a generation of slow-burn chillers from Blair Witch to Absentia. What makes this film special is how it turns rural comfort into creeping paranoia. That weathered farmhouse with its apple orchard. Suddenly, every shadow breathes, the friendly townsfolk with their weathered faces. Each glance carries an unspoken threat. Jessica's hippie friends, including her husband and the enigmatic Emily they find squatting in their new home, float through scenes like beautiful ghosts themselves, their flower child optimism a brittle facade against something ancient stirring in the lake waters. Messiah of Evil, 1973. Imagine H.P. Lovecraft woke up on Venice Beach after an all-night acid trip, salt air thick with rot, neon flickering like a failing pulse, and the moon bleeding over the Pacific. That's the cursed postcard husband and wife duo Willard Huyck and Gloria Katz mailed in 1973, stretching under a $1 million budget into operatic decay. Arletty drives to a seaside town hunting Dad and finds locals who prefer midnight fish fries where you're the entree. The supermarket set piece, fluorescent humming, cat food cans like tombstones, was scored by rolling shopping carts across mic'd tiles. Composer Phil Gladstone recorded chain slides underwater to birth cosmic dread. What elevates Messiah beyond typical drive-in fare is its dreamlike mural sequences, painted corridors where history bleeds through the walls, whispering an apocalyptic gospel about a dark stranger returning from the desert. Production designer Jack Fisk, who later collaborated with David Lynch, transformed abandoned mansions with architectural collage, creating spaces where perspective distorts and shadows consume more than they should. The albino townspeople, faces painted chalk white by makeup artist Robert Schiffer, stare at the moon with livestock blank expressions, their ritual consumption of raw meat, filmed with clinical distance that somehow makes it more disturbing. He, Legend of Hell House, 1973. Step aside, wannabe ghost hunters. Hell House is where your EMF meter goes to die. Author Richard Matheson adapts his own novel, locking two mediums, a physicist, and his wife in the Belasco mansion for a week of mind-splintering seances. Director John Hoff stretched a lean 1 million pounds across Panavision lenses, bathed in queasy greens. Sound engineer Peter Witt tested sub-20 Hz infrasound in select cinemas, rattling rib cages before the first shriek. Roddy McDowall's twitchy medium morphs from coward to righteous fury, culminating in that showdown drenched in infrared film stock from wildlife documentaries. Takes 30 seconds before fogging. Despite earning roughly 2.5 million U.S.-Canada rentals, the film was overshadowed by bigger studio scares. Still, influential eyes were watching. Stephen King cites its pacing and dance macabre, and Netflix echoed its dining table levitation shot for shot. What separates this haunting from its contemporaries is the intellectual framework. Physicist Lionel Barrett brings electromagnetic dampening equipment to scientifically exercise the house, setting up a science versus spiritualism tension that feels thoroughly modern. The mansion itself, actually Wykehurst Park in Surrey, looms with Victorian oppression, its rooms suffocating with red velvet and mahogany darkness. Cinematographer Alan Hume employed pioneering Luma crane shots to make the house itself feel like a predatory presence, tracking the investigators through corridors that seemed to contract with each passing hour. The Other, 1972. Twin boys Niles and Holland Perry whirl through a sun-washed Connecticut farm, but one child's game becomes lethal when giggling innocence turns to graveside dread. Director Robert Mulligan, fresh off To Kill a Mockingbird, tackles Thomas Tryon's own script with a whispered menace that seeps through apple orchard rows. The studio staked $2.25 million on this pastoral nightmare and scraped back roughly $3.5 million in U.S.-Canada rentals, modest against the tidal wave of The Godfather that same year. To keep the young Udvarnaki twins authentic, Mulligan filmed chronologically, spring to harvest, and fed them dummy script pages so every shock hit for real. Veteran acting coach Uta Hagen drilled the boys between takes until their sing-song chatter could pivot to chilling stillness on a dime. Composer Jerry Goldsmith laces a honey-sweet waltz with minor key stings, turning a barn dance motif into a funeral dirge the moment shadows lengthen. What gives The Other its lasting power is its inversion of nostalgic Americana, the freckle-faced boyhood of Tom Sawyer twisted into something venomous. The Golden Hour cinematography by Robert Surtees bathes everything in misleading warmth, making each revelation of darkness more shocking. Russian émigré actress Uta Hagen plays the twins' grandmother Ada with old-world wisdom and teaches Niles the game, an empathic projection technique that becomes the film's supernatural pivot point, blurring the line between imagination and possession. Production designer George Jenkins stuffed the family basement with antique carnival relics, actual props from Coney Island's long-shuttered dark rides, so when Holland dares Niles below, you feel funhouse rot ooze off the screen. Critics praised its literary depth, yet mainstream viewers called the pace too quiet, and 20th Century Fox quietly trimmed marketing just 2 weeks in. Burnt Offerings, 1976. Vacation Vibe or Vampiric Villa? Dan Curtis of Dark Shadows fame sinks $2 million into Oakland's Dunsmuir House, where every scuffed stair the mansion heals siphons life from its tenants. Karen Black and Oliver Reed battled a record California heat wave, thermometer kissing 110 degrees Fahrenheit, while cameras rolled, making Reed's sweat-soaked descent into madness unsettlingly genuine. Legendary Bette Davis, 68 and regal, insisted on climbing the estate's grand staircase herself. Curtis hid oxygen tanks behind Tiffany lamps for emergency breaths between takes. Art director Eugenio Zanetti secretly swapped wall panels overnight so the house looks fresher each dawn. Practical, no VFX. Domestic gross stopped at $1.56 million before Carrie scorched multiplexes, but Stephen King later hailed its slow, relentless rot. What sets Burnt Offerings apart is its parasitic architecture. The house doesn't just contain evil, it feeds on human vitality to rejuvenate itself. The swimming pool sequence, where Reed nearly drowns his son during a hallucination, was shot with underwater cameras that frequently malfunctioned in the chlorine. The resulting footage has a jagged nightmare quality that perfectly mirrors Reed's fragmenting mind. Curtis's television background shows in his economic storytelling family photographs that subtly change, windows that were previously boarded, suddenly clear and gleaming. The film's most enduring image, the grinning chauffeur who haunts Reed's dreams, has become a horror touchstone. Actor Anthony James stood on apple crates to loom an impossible 6'5", pupils dilated with special drops to give him that glassy morgue glare. Horror scholars now tag the film as the missing link between Shirley Jackson's domestic dread and the Amityville Horror's real estate terror. The Sentinel, 1977. Dream Manhattan loft, demonic fine print. Fashion model Allison Parker moves into a brownstone that's secretly a sentry post sealing hell. Universal fronted $3.5 million. Director Michael Winner blew part of it casting Golden Age legends Ava Gardner, Burgess Meredith, and a more cowbell Christopher Walken. Principal photography prowled Brooklyn Heights, but Winner's finale infamously hired real carnival freak show performers to embody the damned tabloid controversy that still sparks debate in film ethics classes. Cinematographer Dick Cratina shot Allison's migraines through Vaseline-smeared glass to mimic ocular auras, while composer Gil Millet fused Gregorian chant with Moog synths to vibrate theater seats at sub-bass. What gives The Sentinel its twisted power is how it transforms gentrification anxiety into supernatural horror. The brownstone's eccentric tenants, including young Jeff Goldblum, Beverly D'Angelo, and Christopher Walken, initially seem like urban color, but gradually reveal themselves as infernal gatekeepers. The film's Catholic mythology, where blind priests maintain eternal vigils against demonic escape, plays against the 70s sexual revolution, with Allison's modeling career and relationship history positioned as spiritual vulnerabilities. The studio expected Exorcist-level returns. Star Wars hyper-drove past, leaving receipts barely above break-even. Yet midnight crowds resurrected it. Clive Barker calls the Tunnel to Hell sequence Hieronymus Bosch with a pulse. Trivia flash. A young Jeff Goldblum improvised his ad-exec dialogue so fast the boom-op missed half. Winner ADR looped him later, making Goldblum lip-sync to himself. Alukarda, 1977. Imagine Carey crash-landing in a Mexican convent after 5 espressos. Director Juan Lopez Moctezuma funnels surplus costumes from Santa Sangre into a 74-minute firestorm of levitating crosses, demonic births, and blood-drenched nuns. Censors slashed the domestic release, yet the Paris Fantastic Film Festival cheered its uncut premiere, cementing Tina Romero's shriek as the nunsploitation apocalypse. Budget whispers hover around 400,000 pesos. Crew bought pig's blood by the drum, blended with chocolate syrup for edible viscosity. Romero performed her wire-rigged levitation in a stone chapel. Hidden pulleys strained so loudly, dialogue was dubbed later. Makeup guru Antonio Ramirez mixed real ash into face paint, so every frantic sweat bead carved gray rivulets down nun cheeks. Visual shorthand for faith turned to cinders. What elevates Alukarda beyond exploitation is its genuine commitment to blasphemous imagery as rebellion. The title character's relationship with innocent Justine functions as both sapphic awakening and demonic possession. The film never distinguishes between the two, suggesting religious repression itself creates the monsters it fears. The production design by Cleomenes Stamatiadis wrapped nuns in blood-soaked bandages instead of traditional habits, creating eerie mummy-like figures whose faith literally blinds and constrains them. Guerrilla-shot exteriors at an abandoned hacienda wrapped before sunrise to dodge police after noise complaints from goat farmers. Modern fans, Guillermo del Toro keeps a 35mm print, hail its proto-punk energy. Academic journals dissect its colonial guilt subtext. Houseu, Nitten Seitsimen Kumita Seitsimen. 7 giggly schoolgirls, 1 carnivorous house. Director Nobuhiko Obayashi cannibalized his 11-year-old daughter's nightmares. Then Toho handed him 140 million yen and said, "Make it weirder." Shot on handmade mats and stop motion, scenes feel like candy-coated pop art. Melody's fingers still play piano after the instrument devours her. Kung Fu decapitates a chandelier mid-roundhouse. Sweet battles futon stuffing that morphs into marshmallow quicksand. Obayashi painted apple blossom backdrops on black velvet, lit them from behind, then rewound the negative for triple exposures. Practical trippiness decades before CGI TikTok filters. Domestic teens flocked, but U.S. distributors balked at Scooby-Doo on LSD. Criterion's 2009 restoration minted new cult converts and inspired music video directors like the Daniels. What makes Houseu so unforgettable is its commitment to childlike nightmare logic where cause and effect have no relationship. Obayashi, who began his career in experimental filmmaking and commercials, deliberately employed techniques that would look wrong to sophisticated viewers, jump cuts that violate continuity, composited elements with visible matte lines, animation that intrudes into live action. The result feels like watching a fairy tale disintegrate into fever dreams. The Manitu, 1978. Diagnosis: neck tumor, actually reincarnated medicine man fetus. Cure: lasers. William Girdler wrangled $3 million, Avco Embassy's biggest indie gamble, and shot surgical scenes in a refrigerated set to keep latex prosthetics from melting. Tony Curtis, playing a hustler psychic, lounged in a parka between takes, puffing cigars whose smoke doubled as operating room haze. Effects chief Thomas B. Fisher inflated rubber bladders under Susan Strasberg's skin via aquarium pumps for pulse-throbbing body horror that predated Videodrome. The finale catapults shaman Misquamicus into space, real 70mm starfield plates matted over an X-ray room. Audiences laughed, critics scoffed, and the box office barely matched cost. What makes The Manitu such delirious fun is its kitchen sink approach to horror. Native American mysticism collides with modern medicine, computer science, and even space exploration in the Bananas finale, where Strasberg conjures white medicine by stripping naked in a hospital bed while stars swirl around her. The film's culture clash premise, where Western science fails against indigenous spiritual forces, was ahead of its time, even if the execution veers into camp. Yet Lalo Schifrin's Chant Meets Synth score now graces lo-fi playlists, and Jordan Peele cited Manitu as inspiration for genre-blending audacity in a 2024 podcast. Trivia: an appeals board actually downgraded the film from R to PG, convinced cultural themes outweighed gore. Parents screamed. Patrick, 1978. Coma doesn't equal calm. Aussie export Patrick proves eyes-open patients can fling nurses with sheer spite. Producer Anthony Janane rustled 400,000 Australian dollars, peanuts even then, and director Richard Franklin commandeered a decommissioned Melbourne asylum, shooting in echoey corridors for natural reverb. Lead actor Robert Thompson stared unblinking via a hidden mirror reflecting co-star Susan Penhaligon's face. Blink once, reshoot. Brian May's theremin-laced score was mixed on a then-novel 24-track desk, its oscillations synced to Patrick's heartbeat monitor, so every beep tightens nerves. Overseas, Superman caped box office dreams, but Quentin Tarantino later screened The Needle and Eye Cut at his Austin festival, praising its Ozploitation swagger. What elevates Patrick above medical horror cliches is its psychosexual subtext. The catatonic Patrick develops an erotic fixation on his nurse Kathy, possessing her typewriter to tap out romantic and threatening messages. Director Richard Franklin, a devoted Hitchcock student, employs voyeuristic camera angles that make viewers complicit in Patrick's leering gaze. The institutional setting, clinical white tiles and mechanical beds, creates sterile menace that contrasts with the primal rage of Patrick's telekinetic outbursts. The Brood, 1979. Divorce therapy never birthed such monsters. David Cronenberg poured heartbreak into The Brood, scoring his biggest budget yet, about $1.5 million, and locking down heavyweights Oliver Reed and Samantha Eggar. Filmed in frigid Ontario, child actors donned dwarf suits stuffed with hot water bottles to survive minus 20 degrees Celsius nights. Eggar's prosthetic brood sack was chilled between takes. The bursting scene stank of raw chicken liver, triggering crew retches. Cronenberg rolled sound anyway. Composer Howard Shore recorded in an empty Olympic pool for cavernous reverb, mirroring Soma-Free Institute's concrete chill. The film clawed back $5 million globally, but Alien hogged 1979 headlines. Martin Scorsese later called it horror at its rawest emotional nerve. What makes The Brood so devastating is its autobiographical foundation. Cronenberg wrote it during his own bitter custody battle, channeling parental rage into literal monster children born from emotional trauma. The Soma Free Institute's radical therapy, where patients externalize their anger through physical manifestations, serves as a metaphor for how divorce weaponizes children. Art director Carol Spear used institutional green paint and fluorescent lighting to create spaces devoid of comfort. A visual echo of family structures collapsed. Phantasm, 1979. Sleepwalk into small-town funeral homes and meet the tall man. Don Coscarelli, age 23, stretched $300,000 over 3 years of weekend shoots. He glued a camera to a skateboard, dragged it on a fishing line, then reversed footage to birth the iconic chrome sphere POV. Actor Angus Scrimm stood on elevating apple boxes towering 6 feet 4 inches plus lifts. His improvised hissed, "Boy!" still rattled midnight crowds. The mausoleum's marble? Painted plywood scavenged from a bank remodel. Test audiences screamed so loud the distributor doubled prints overnight, vaulting grosses past $22 million worldwide. Composer Fred Myrow blended music box lullabies with pipe organ doom. James Wan later lifted its motif for Insidious. What gives Phantasm its lasting power is how perfectly it captures adolescent dread about death and alienation. Protagonist Mike, recently orphaned and facing his brother's departure, discovers death itself isn't what he thought. The tall man transforms corpses into dwarf slaves for an alien dimension. The film's dream logic structure, where scenes flow with emotional rather than narrative logic, mirrors teenage anxiety, where everything familiar suddenly seems threatening. The Medusa Touch, 1978. Give misanthrope novelist John Moeller a bad review and watch skyscrapers crumble. Director Jack Gold wrangled £5 million for explosive telekinesis, casting Richard Burton in an acid-tongued, late-career tour de force. Effects guru John Richardson built a 60-foot styrofoam replica of St. Paul's Cathedral, rigged with 200 pounds of powder. One-take detonation showered nearby pinewood sets in faux masonry dust. Burton rewrote monologues nightly, sipping vodka from an on-set teacup. The crew nicknamed him Moeller. Composer Michael J. Lewis recorded distorted choir boy hums in a midnight chapel. A chandelier swayed unplanned, fueling rumors of Burton's glare-bent physics. Though international grosses topped £4 million, U.S. runs fizzled amid Halloween hype. What distinguishes The Medusa Touch is its apocalyptic scope. While most telekinesis films confine their destruction to intimate settings, Morlar's hatred extends to collapsing bridges, crashing planes, and even a nuclear power plant meltdown. The film's political subtext, where establishment figures from judges to doctors dismiss Morlar's warnings, creates a cynical portrait of institutional failure that feels thoroughly modern. Burton's performance, all Welsh thunder and contempt, elevates pulp material to Greek tragedy. The Possession of Joel Delaney, 1972. Upper East Side privilege collides with Santeria fury when socialite Shirley MacLaine realizes her brother hosts a Harlem serial killer spirit. Shot winter '71 on a $1.5 million budget, director Waris Hussein spliced handheld 16mm possession flashes into 35mm masters to jar viewers. MacLaine performed a live boa rooftop standoff. Wranglers held iced towels to calm the reptile between takes. Foley artists reversed pig squeals for Joel's demon growl, a trick Sam Raimi later echoed. Censors slashed the UK print for a Children at Knife Point finale. Bans lifted only in 2007. Paramount opened opposite The Godfather, and the box office wilted, yet academics praised its class war critique. What makes Joel Delaney so disturbing is its urban class anxiety. Manhattan socialite. Nora must confront cultural forces she's deliberately avoided when her brother becomes possessed by the spirit of a Puerto Rican murderer. The film treats Santeria with unusual respect for its era, showing it as a complex spiritual system rather than exotic voodoo cliché. The finale, where Joel forces Nora's children to eat dog food while naked, remains one of the most transgressive hostage scenes in horror cinema. Deathdream, 1974. Doorbell rings. Vietnam-killed Andy Brooks strolls in, pallid, silent, thirsting for blood. Director Bob Clark squeezed terror from $300,000. Rookie FX wizard Tom Savini mixed crushed mothballs into pancake makeup for corpse blue rot and pumped stage blood via turkey baster IV lines. Florida nights hit 98% humidity. The morgue makeup slid. Savini dusted faces with talc for undead Matt. Actor John Marley smashed real China mid-take, slicing his hand. The panicked profanity you hear is authentic. Clark filmed cemetery sequences guerrilla style without permits. Local police mistook prop rifles for real, halting shooting until producers coughed up donuts and a cameo. What gives Deathdream its haunting resonance is its Vietnam War subtext. Andy Brooks returns from a war that transformed young men into killing machines, only to continue his bloodlust on American soil. The film's alternate title, Dead of Night, reflects how Vietnam's darkness followed soldiers home. Andy's slow decomposition throughout the film, his need for blood to temporarily restore his appearance, serves as a metaphor for addiction and PTSD that plagued returning veterans. Paired on drive-in bills with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the film's anti-war gut punch turned cult scripture. Stephen King cites its final mother and son graveyard hug as one of horror's bleakest codas. Which forgotten fright will you track down first? Drop your pick or argue for your own hidden gem in the comments below. Smash that subscribe button, ring the bell so you never miss our next excavation of silver screen sorcery, and share this list with every horror-hungry friend you've got. Until next time, keep your projectors humming and your crucifixes polished, because the Movieverse channel is just getting started.